Yeah, hi everybody. I guess we can start. Seems like there's no room anyway, so people coming later, bad luck. How are you all doing? Having a good time? It's Nate. Cool. So yeah, let's not wait too long so we can get to the party. Quick thing about me, I'm Anton. I'm a software engineer at 1,5 Grad. You can find me basically everywhere at AB aus G, and I'm the author of HomeWidget. So this is what we're going to talk about today. It's HomeScreenWidgets. So what are HomeScreenWidgets? When you look at what Google or iOS is writing in the documentation about this, they write stuff about you can show your app in additional contexts. You can help your users achieve their goals more quickly and more easy directly from their home screen. In the end, HomeScreenWidgets are just these little things or sometimes bigger things on the user's home screen. This can be for weather app, the weather forecast, can help to track your habits, help you with journaling, or even keep track of your workout streaks. Speaking of streaks, maybe the most famous HomeScreenWidgets is the one by Duolingo, and they really take this additional real estate on the home screen of the users to play with their brand and really make sure that you do your Italian lessons at like 11:30 in the evening, so you just get your streak. And they are also finding that half of the learners with the widget installed have a streak of at least 6 months, really showing that obviously with Duolingo it's a bit hen and egg. It really shows though that having this extra screen estate and real estate close to the user is really can really help your users get into your app. Because let's face it, on iOS alone, if you have the widget installed, it's 4 times the space as your app icon would be. So more space for your brand, like the Greenbird. So Greenbird, we're here for the Bluebird. How about HomeScreenWidgets with Flutter? When I looked into it, I noticed that because of size constraints that the widget have and also the way on how often you can render it, unfortunately means that we can't just run our Flutter apps on the HomeScreenWidget. And yeah, so thank you for coming. Please give feedback here and follow me on X. And I guess we now have about 35 minutes of Q&A if you have any questions. You're just kidding, obviously. Like if we look at all of these apps, these are our Flutter apps. So I think I saw Dario somewhere here from whatever this is actually called. Pronounced rather. So yeah, these are our Flutter apps, and I'm really happy that those apps all choose my package HomeWidget for their HomeScreenWidgets. So what is HomeWidget? It allows you to be it gives you an abstraction for the data synchronization. It helps you with interactive widgets, so you can call dark code firmware native widgets. And it also, in my opinion, helps you with a really intensive documentation on what you actually need to do on the native side, because you still need to do some native code. And also there's some tricks on how you can still sort of include your Flutter widgets on the widgets. As I mentioned, you still have to write native code, and native code can be a bit daunting. So for the next half hour or so, we'll try to add, or I will try it at least, to add HomeScreenWidgets to our beloved Flutter counter app, send and display data. And if I can make it in a live demo in 30 minutes for 2 platforms, I think you all can go to your PMs next week, tomorrow, and tell them, yeah, we can do it with HomeScreenWidgets. So, are you all ready? Let's get started. So we'll start with iOS and the configuration we need to do for that. Under the hood, HomeWidget uses data storage with app groups, which basically means to make sure that the target of the widget extension and your app through this app group are talking to the same data storage, which is the user default, which is the same as the shared preference packages uses. Before you can do it, you need to register that group ID on developer.apple.com. You'll need a paid account for it. And it's the same place where you would also register your normal app ID. Then you create a widget extension in Xcode. I will talk about these stuff that gets generated with that. and then adding the group ID to both app target and the widget extension. And this is what we're going to do. So let's find Xcode. So I already prepared the group ID. So what we'll do first is we'll go to File, New, and Target, and we'll add a widget extension. So we have that. Then let's go ahead and add the group capabilities. So we first go into our runner target. And here in signing in capabilities, we'll go to capabilities, search for group ID, and then sometimes, now it's easier. So if you have then selected them or have internet and it takes it from the, like this is weird UI. Do you see like Xcode? Like it's at the bottom here, I click it, and it suddenly jumps at the just Xcode things. So we added the group ID to our runner, and now we do the same on our home screen widget, the widget extension here. So once again, capability, search for group, and wait a minute till Xcode decides to offer us the autocompletion. It is, and once again, this nice animation. They really care for the details, don't they? So this is now the group ID, and let's quickly look into this home widget that was created here. So here at the top, we have the timeline provider and the timeline entry. And what this is doing is basically the widgets on iOS work on this timeline. So you can already define at which point in time the widget should update. So for example, if you have a calendar app, or like Duolingo is probably doing it like every hour, they are scheduling already a new widget with potentially new data. In this timeline entry, this is the place where we later will adjust our data model a bit. So right now, it's in emoji. And so here's the view. The view is where you define your Swift UI layout. So it's kind of similar-ish to Flutter layout. So a VStack is basically what's a column in Flutter. So you have the time of the entry with the label and then the emoji. And then lastly, we have this widget thing here, which is a configuration. We more or less just care for this, this kind later on. And then you have a preview. And that's already it. That gets generated. And so if we run it, quick thing, depending on the export version, the build steps sort of change. And so right now, in the current Xcode version, we'll need to move the thin binary at the bottom below this embed foundation extensions. It's depending on the Flutter or the Xcode version, Xcode will introduce this extra step at random points in this list. It just has to be before thin binary, and then it works. If it doesn't work, Xcode will bug beforehand. So just try and error and try to lose not too many hairs when dealing with Xcode. But I guess we all know that. So let's run the app. Yeah, one downside, by the way, that we'll later see is that we won't have hot reload, unfortunately, when we do this because we're working on the native side. The better is when we get back to Flutter that we have hot reload again. So yeah, our counter still works obviously because we didn't touch it yet. So if we go to the home screen, we can now add our home widget demo, and here we see the different form factors. Let's pick this one, and we see our widget that belongs to our app. So this was iOS setup. On Android, it's pretty similar. You don't need to do all this registration of IDs. You need to enable Glance and Jetpack Compose if you want to use Glance and Jetpack Compose, which I would, if you don't want to work with XML layouts, you should do that. And then you need to create 3 files, which is the app widget, the widget receiver, and configuration XML. And we need to all register those in Android Manifest. Let's do that now. So to Android Studio, I've already created these files for this demo. So here we have the configuration file. Here you define like the initial layout, which is like this loading layout in this case. Certain height constraints is there, freely resizable. also like previews of the widget you can define here. Then the app widget, which is a glance app widget in this case, is really a simple class, and here you have the glance content, which is the actual layouting. So once again, it looks kind of similar to Flutter. I found that it's, if you write your code in Flutter and then pass it to ChatGPT and ask it, can you make this a glance widget that works good enough? And yet, I personally find it super fun to at least take a look at what they are doing on the Jetpack Compose side. So this is the app widget, and then the app widget receiver. There's a lot of logic hidden inside of HomeWidget that HomeWidget takes care of, that will help you update your widget from the Flutter side, which means that if you extend this HomeWidget glance widget receiver, it's just, you need this single line of code to let HomeWidget know what class your widget is. And then lastly, in the Android manifest, we need to tie this all together as this receiver here. So we have our widget receiver, and then this configuration file, and that's already it. So this app was already running with these files. So if you go to the home screen here and add a widget, we'll see our home widget demo app here. And we can also add this one to it. And that's it for Android. So finally, back to Flutter. So we now have widgets on both platforms. Now let's actually send data. And HomeWidget uses save data to send the data to the widget, and then update widget to let the systems, like this timeline, like it will refresh the timeline on iOS, and will make sure that on Android, the widget receiver, the app widget receiver, will get an update as well. So let's now jump into the third IDE for this demo. So this is our default counter app, and let's just jump into the increment counter method. We'll make this asynchronous. Let's get the current value from HomeWidget. With the ID, we will call it counter, and then we provide the default value of 0. Our new value, we'll just put this. We provide the default value, we can force this, and then we'll save our widget data for the counter. We'll save this new value. Lastly, we do home. Oh, thank you. I was afraid of the live demo, but I have you as audience. That helps a lot. So the Android name, this is our receiver name. And then on iOS, this is actually this kind variable I was talking about earlier. So it's this one. And then we obviously here we say our counter is on the new value. And that's it on the Flutter side. So let's go to the slides. And then on iOS, we'll start with iOS again. We need to do one more thing inside of Flutter, is that we need to tell HomeWidget what app group we are actually talking to, in this case the app group ID, and we'll do that. And then we need to adjust our timeline provider and our timeline entry to match this data structure, and also make the timeline provider work with just getting whenever HomeWidget tells the widget to update, to get the most recent data. And so let's first go into here, and we'll just do it in this method for now. And then back into our beloved Xcode. Can you see is it fine with the size? Or it should be bigger? All right. So we will go to the simple entry, and then instead of an emoji, we say this is a counter, and this is an int. And we need to do some adjustments here. For preview. This is actually not like we're now in the get snapshot method. So what we'll do is we get our user defaults for the app group. And then we'll say our counter is our prefs. Integer for counter. And then we'll say our entry is the simple entry. Counter. Because that is now, I believe this is the correct syntax for Swift. Apparently not, double quotes. And then our timeline will also adjust to get the most recent snapshot. For the entry. And let's run it again. Let's not run it again. Let's first make sure that we actually are displaying now our counter value. So good time. So quickly summarizing again, what we did is we adjusted the timeline entry to match our data structure. And then also here we adjusted our snapshot and our timeline. So if we now count up and we go back to our home screen, you see our counter value from Flutter. So iOS, obviously, Android is next. And once again, Glance home screen widgets are weird. Like probably if there's some droidcon people in here, I would wonder why. Like home widget, like Glance itself, it was really long in like a 0 point something release. I mean, home widget itself is as well. But it showed really much in the Glance widget between the first versions of home widget, Glance support in home widget, and then like me writing a blog post about it. The Glance API got stable, but completely changed how it updates widgets, which was a nightmare to figure out. I found a nice solution though. You'll just need this line of code with the home widget Glance state definition and all the logic behind that, how it's updating, how it's getting the data is taken care of. And then this current state object gives you the preferences, the shared preferences on Android to then access the counter. So it's in principle quite similar. So let's back into Android Studio. We go into our app widget and we say our state definition. And this is the home widget Glance state definition. And then we'll pass in the current state. So now it was final, it was let, so now it's obviously val. And so we get our current state from the preferences, and then our counter is from the prefs get int for counter. Our default value should be 0, and then like we can keep the Fluttercon, and we say our text, and it's counter to string. And so the cool thing is we're doing Flutter, so all of this stuff on the Flutter side of things with sending the data and updating the widget is already taken care of, at least I would say. So once again, the Glance state definition, use home widget Glance state definition, and get the home widget Glance state, and you can save the counter. So let's count up to a number. go to the home screen, and you can see we are at 6. And I think this is what we counted up here. So that's 1 to 7. It's 7 now. So also works on Android. So I mentioned earlier that HomeWidget offers also a way to display Flutter widgets. And I meant sort of. And so the way this works is that HomeWidget has a method called render Flutter widget. And what it's doing is you give it a widget, can be off screen, whatever widget you want it to be. And then HomeWidget will take a screenshot of that, save that image, store the path, and then you, on the native side of things, you display an image on your home screen widget. And so there are some caveats with it, because like how Dart UI works, you can't really take the picture in a background isolate. So if you want to offload that work or do it in like interactive callbacks, and also like for assets, I would not necessarily use it. But let's say you have this like graph component that you have in your app or other like widgets where in Flutter you spend a lot of time working on these, where it's just not really feasible to necessarily rebuild all of that. I would argue mostly static stuff, then also on the native side, because then you have 3 times the work, because you have to do it in Flutter once, in Android and on iOS. So I think this is a really nice in-between solution. So how it's working is like before render Flutter widget with whatever widget you want, give it a key where it's saved, and then just update the widget. So let's do it on the Flutter side. Home widget, and the Flutter widget, and let's just use container for now. So let's make our container a bit nice and really high quality. So we give it a size. So what's your favorite color hex code? Somebody. Oh, that sounds like a fun life. So come on, what's the favorite color? All right, ooh, very pretty. All right, and so like I said, we are capturing the widget, and then we are updating it, and then let's just put it as an action here. All right, so what this is going to do is it will capture an image, and using render Flutter widget will save that as an image on the platform. On iOS, and because of the time we won't do it on iOS because it would be the same thing again. So you would need to adjust your timeline entry to include this new path to the image in that data, and then in the get snapshot method, also like get that path from the data, and then you display the image in the method. Because this is so much like, I think we will do it on Android, and it would be the same on iOS. And so on Android, it's the same thing. So we're getting the path to the image, and we're displaying the image. So let's go into here. So we are getting our counter, and then now let's get our image path. Now. Some Kotlin magic. Using the bitmap factory. And this is already all we needed to do. So, run this again. We should see our nice color box. So obviously this is still 0 because we don't get the initial value, but we can count up to, let's say, 11. And go here, we should probably actually invoke this. And so now we have our nice box on the HomeScreen widget. So yeah, so now it's like you see, it's just a colored box, but you can really do it with every widget. Obviously, when you need to do in that widget, like getting data from the backend, might be a bit complicated, but really, if you have like especially static images, I think it's a super great and quick way to get really far ahead with the widgets. So we won't do interactive widget in this live demo. That was a bit too risky for me. But so how that's working is that you can register an interactivity callback with HomeWidget, which if it's like it needs to be a static method and annotated to be a Dart entry point. And then what HomeWidget can do under the hood is that even when your app is completely killed, when you have the interactive stuff set up on your widget, it will fire up a new Flutter engine and will call that callback of you. So a couple of slides ago with the example apps, and Duco is using this to mock sort of like page navigation on one of their widgets, where they have like a button, send it, and then they basically send some configuration code back to the widget from there to switch between pages. Because I think it's a super nice idea. There's also somebody like natively on iOS who did like a widget spinner widget with like interactive widgets, so you can do a lot of fun stuff with that. But yeah, so what you need to do is register that callback, and that's all you need to do on the Flutter side. And then on iOS, you need to add HomeWidget to the pod target of also the widget. It's documented. And then creating an app intent and attaching that intent to a button in the layout. And I mean, this sounds like you need to do a lot of native stuff. What I really try to point out with this talk and the demo, like, yes, native stuff, but like we could do it in like reasonable amount of time and amount of work. And so all you need to do in terms of native code actually fits on the slide. So on the left, you create the intent and you call HomeWidget background worker, which is the thing that will fire up the engine. And then also you can attach it to a button inside of your widget. And on Android, it's more or less the same thing. So you create an action callback, once again using intent from HomeWidget, and attach it. And also on Android, the code that's needed fits on one slide. So you create the callback and you attach the callback to your widget, which I think is like a reasonable amount of work, with the benefit that then the actual code that happens and will do stuff can be written in Dart just once, which is, I think, super nice. All right, couple of more quick features from HomeWidget is you have the ability to have analytics. So what I showed with Duolingo, they kind of know which user have HomeScreenWidgets installed. You can do that with HomeWidget as well. You can check if your app was opened from the widget. On iOS, you also have lock-screen-widgets, as that is just a different form factor. So not these live activities, but the small widgets you can put below the clock. And on Android, you don't have lock-screen widgets, but you can do a request pin widget, which will enable the users to directly add your HomeScreenWidgets from your app, which I think one of the hardest things is actually to get your users informed that your app offers HomeScreenWidgets and allows them to add those to the home screen. And it's super nice that you can do it from your app. On iOS, with iOS 18, they are now introducing like, I think they're calling like big app icons, but it's just like you can swap your app icon into a home screen widget. And this is also already supported by HomeWidget, because it's just an iOS feature that it checks if the app has any home screen widgets of the size, and you can just swap it. So now this time, this is actually it. So like I mentioned, if you have feedback, would be greatly appreciated. Also follow me on Twitter. Thank you very much.